Thank you so much, Shubham, for joining in. Thank you, Lalit. Thank you, Sambhav. Uh, Guys, good afternoon. My name is Amit Kaushal. I'm an IP lawyer. I'm basically an engineer and a lawyer, and we have been focusing only on uh, intellectual property for our clients. We help them protect their ideas by filing the right trademarks, patents, copyrights for them, so that they can compete with the right people in the right manner, so they can stop competition by filing by protecting these ideas. Uh, Let me introduce our first speaker, Lalit. Lalit Valecha is a partner at Ahuja Valecha and Associates. He's an experienced chartered accountant and has demonstrated history of working in accounting industry. And he has been helping his clients with business planning, internal audit, risk management, and international tax and corporate finance. Lalit is a strong entrepreneurial professional focused on accounting and finance and spearheading an energetic and vibrant team that puts customer first and believes in achieving excellence in all deliverables. So we have been fortunate enough to be working with Lalit for the last few years. We understand, we have seen him closely working with his clients very passionately, and his objective is always customers success. How can he make his customer a successful venture, and that's where his success lies. Lalit, thank you so much for coming over this afternoon.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for having me here. It's been a great pleasure working along the side with many of our clients also. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sambhav Malhotra. Sambhav is again a chartered accountant, and he's a senior consultant at Startup Movers Private Limited. Sambhav is a first attempt qualified CA, working with startup ecosystem for the last 8 years, and he has seen several round of investments with and a plethora of learning from failures of the startups in the industry. He specializes in setting up the backbone, that is the financial and legal structure for startups. Besides managing about 100 plus startups on a retainership model, he is also a seed and strategic investor in a few of the startups that he works with. Sambhav, great to have you on the board. Looking forward to have your views in this summit.
Thank you, team. Thank you for having me here. Looking forward to adding value to the ecosystem.
Thank you, Sambhav. Our next speaker is Shubham Deshmukh. He's an engineer and he's the CEO of a company called Iedo. Am I pronouncing it right, Sambhav? Shubham? Iedo. So he's the president of Toastmasters for Pune, and he's a passionate traveler. He operates workspaces for corporates and MSMEs. It will be good to know your business in detail. How have you been pivoting or managing COVID when you're operating workspaces for corporates and MSMEs? He is an experienced founder with a demonstrated history in technology and service industry. And Shubham has a lot of other skills which help him manage his team and is a great leader for his team. Shubham, thank you so much for coming over. Let me start with Shubham first. Shubham, I went through your profile and you were a recent graduate. I think you graduated from engineering in 2018. And then instead of taking the normal route of working somewhere, you started on your own. Tell us about your entrepreneurial journey in the last 3 years, 2.5 years.
So I started when I was in college.
Yes.
When I was the president of MIT Entrepreneurship Cell, I had invited certain MIT cell entrepreneurship cells of certain colleges and formed a group called EDG. That was Entrepreneurship Development Group. The plan was the peer learning and helping each other. So we had roughly 7, 8 engineering and management colleges coming together and forming a group. So when we discuss something, it was the community formation, but making it a longevity, we thought that having a community won't have. So I make it completely a private limited company, renamed it to IDO. It is registered as Sonai Conglomerate Private Limited. We started conducting various events, so workshops, event, so through which various students can learn, industry experts can guide that. In future, we ventured into the workspace. We have 2 centers in Pune, and upcoming centers which were planned got delayed due to the COVID and the work from home scenario. And in the similar way, the plan was to set up an angel fund. We have helped certain startups in raising funds to angel networks and angel fund based in Pune and Mumbai. We are planning to set up our own angel fund, which got delayed and which is into the planning stage right now. So that's my journey so far in a brief. Thank you for
Excellent,
having me
excellent,
here.
excellent, Shubham. Thank you so much. Uh, Over to you, Lalit. Lalit, tell us how you make your clients successful. What do you do for them to make them successful?
Yeah, so various activities, as in right from basically being a very conventional firm that we started with when I was Pricewaterhouse before I jumped into practice. So learned a lot while my journey with PwC and a lot of things that work in a larger organization. So try to implement most of it even in the larger corporates and also in the SMEs, because when we look at the SME segment, which is a large segment, many things are not in place while the company is getting established. So we try to bring in the right processes in place, right, to kind of how the accounting is to be done. We start from that, but we also give the option of scalability in terms of when we've seen a lot of startups in the case that we manage that they wanted to have an office in the US. We kind of help them establish in the US because most of the B2B SaaS startups kind of focus on the US market. They need to have some presence, either a parent entity or a subsidiary structure or something like that. So we kind of help them establish that. We just don't stop out there. We kind of help them even with the regular compliances, which is on annual basis, which will include both from the India standpoint as well as the US. Again, Singapore has been a hot destination. A lot of companies have looked at Singapore also in terms of various benefits that is available. So we help them do the structuring in Singapore, help them establish out there. And in the ecosystem, like whenever obviously the SME segment or the startup world as well, we realize that there have been opportunities where there have been exit opportunities. So gives us a headroom in terms of any tax structuring that can be done. We helped lately. We helped one of the clients where they were a part of a management group, and there was a management buyout. We kind of supported a management buyout from a company where slum sale was undertaken and a lot of documentation support was required. So we have a team internally which is also helping us on the legal side. So we kind of do that as well. So various activities, and I think the need comes from the evolution of the businesses. And while we started with the large corporate, so there are many things that we've learned across a journey, right from the corporate that we serve, because being in Pune, you know that it's a belt where there are a lot of IT companies, a lot of auto ancillary companies. So there's a lot of knowledge that we gain from them, and whatever we gain from them, we try to implement for most of the companies that we do. The other way also, like even while people are appearing for or going for pitches to kind of the early stage investors, they need a business plan. So we kind of even help them to establish that business plan that can kind of projects them in the right manner. Uh, Even kind of going into the details of what's the business model, helping them some tweaking in the pitch deck that is required. So all of this is something is kind of there within the bucket, and that's how we kind of support our clients all across, other than the regular stuff that we are already doing in terms of the compliance management, be it the regular tax compliances, the indirect tax, GST compliances, all of that. But I think the real success comes from the opportunities that are there either globally or some kind of restructuring, some kind of tax planning, and all the other compliances that may take place around that.
Excellent. So, Lalit, that's a fabulous stuff that you're doing for your clients. It's not just a regular taxation, regular financial planning. It's beyond that. It's clearly evident from your work that you're helping them in business plan and pitch deck, which perhaps is outside the purview of your services, but it's because of your obsession towards your clients, your obsession towards adding a value in your client's work, you are doing more than what you're asked to do. Great, Lalit. That's a great learning. I think that obsession is very, very important. Sambhav, over to you. You have been mentoring over 100 plus startups. Uh, Tell us about your journey with 100 plus startups. How do you mentor them? How do you help them succeed?
So the idea, as you've read in the initial introduction also, the initial phase of my career started off with a few startups. For an example, a Byju's before Byju's was there was a company typical to what Byju's had built in 2013. I worked with a company in 2009, raised millions of funds, but unfortunately could not prosper. And likewise, there were 4 or 5 back-to-back failure stories that early in my career I saw. And typically those mistakes were repeated. I mean, they were just not from the finance front, they were also from how the companies are building values, what the cultures they are building, how are the co-founder relationships, are the legal ends all tied up or not. all those learnings when we brought together in 2014 is when we started. From there on, these are the learnings which we have, apart from, of course, what the finance and the legal side that we look. We are trying to blend other things as well in bringing in rationality from all fronts, right? So, for an example, a co-founders agreement is something that we really stress on in our startup ecosystem, right? People usually come back to us whenever they are about to sign a term sheet or whenever they are about to sign a shareholders agreement, and most of the times you realize the co-founder agreement itself is missing out on that front. This is one example which in our portfolio or the kitty of startups that we have, we stress on. Similarly, we are trying to blend a culture of treating finance not as an expense but as an investment, right? So typically, when a founder starts, they go out looking for say a CTO or a sales. To that extent, they're trying to figure out a lot of other things in the business scenario. But when you look at the finance angle of it, where the perception needs to change, is where we are working pretty hard on our startups. Where early on, we are trying to build a culture in the co-founder segment that working in finance and legal is an investment for your firm and not an expense. So you look at it as a long-term story, and rather than just comparing it with a few vendors, find a business partner for yourself. So what we are trying to blend is not just act as a finance and legal consultant, but blend in the business partnership of adding values whatever way we can. So that is the trend that we see, that we've in a kind of way built a beta market for our 100 startups, where each all startups are each other interacting, and some are doing the market validation. Some of our startups are offering services to our portfolio startups itself. So these are the kind of different things that we have observed and built in the last 6-7 years, adding value to the ecosystem. You're on mute, Amit.
Very, very interesting, Sambhav. I think in the beginning, everybody considers these lawyers and CAs as an expense. I mean, their books are all over the place. Their contracts are all over the place, and sometimes when they go for funding, or when they're maturing and they realize that they have messed up everything, and at that stage, sometimes it's repairable, sometimes it's not repairable. I think what you're making a point here is consider these people as your extended family who are helping you achieve your goal by being more organized, by being compliant financially, legally. Those are some great tips, Sambhav. Sambhav, give us two main reasons, two topmost reasons why startups fail. Because majority of them fail. 90% startups fail in about just 3 or 4 years. Majority of them are failing. It's something wrong that they're doing, right? What's the wrong thing that they're doing?
One perception that we internally build in our own team is it's never about the idea, it's always about the implementation, right? So two biggest failures I have seen is on the human resource front, where building the team itself, people not right person not doing the right job, and then not having an execution or a pivot strategy, right? So just focusing on the idea that this is a multi-million dollar idea, or what exactly it is solving for. Is it actually creating a shareholder's value in the end? Is it going to sustain for long? So if I have to talk about just the two aspects of it, I think one would be the team, the human resource, building the right team. So, and the second one would be having a right strategy, which can change and which founders can pivot at the right time.
So what you're saying is failure to execute properly and a not so strong team. Now, yeah, so Jeff Bezos and Henry Ford said the founders of a company must have the courage to hire people who are smarter than them. Now, and Jeff Bezos also said that for a founder of a company, it's very important to hire the first 10 kick-ass people who are smarter than you, who can do their jobs well, and let them hire the team further. Now, do founders have the courage to hire people who are smarter than them? Let me ask that question to Shubham.
Thank you for asking me that question. For me, it's very relevant that for me, the hiring means I have to hire a very experienced people. So the first intern we hired was an MBA who had done MBA, and I was doing my engineering to that time, who had more marketing knowledge on field. So it is really important, and founders do that. And certain founders may get on back foot, but most of the founders do that. They go for hiring good employees and who are much more experienced and much more knowledgeable than them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So the team is one of the key part. in the success,
Absolutely, no
because
doubt
the
about it.
founders or co-founders can't do every task themselves.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So,
And
Shubham,
one point I would like to mention here is certain founders just go for hiring interns. I have seen certain IT companies, IT product companies who have developed their product with the interns. Interns don't know the minor part of it, and at the after 6 months or a year, that product is not well is accepted by the market. So just to save the cost, some founders have done that, and I have seen that in the ecosystem of Pune. So whoever is
mhm.
attending that, I would surely say, don't just be yourself on the interns. Have some experts in the group to guide those interns and make a good products.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. Yes, you can give opportunity to interns, but it's very important for you to have a bunch of knowledgeable people who can give direction to these interns. That's a great point. Shubham, in the last 18 months, let me say, in the last 1 year, let's say, what challenges has COVID given you, and how are you overcome these challenges?
So for us, we were about to sign 3 new deals, approx of 500 seats for one kind. That was a Fortune 500 company, then 200 for others and 100 for other. So those all 3 deals were in discussion in March, February, and March got on hold for now. So the workspace industry have took a back foot for now, but in the longer run, it will have a glorious future because companies would now prefer to go in a more flexible manner rather signing a 3 years agreement with the landlords. So for now we are struggling, but once the pandemic is completely over, workspace industry is gonna grow, the flexible workspace industry.
Let me ask this follow-up question to Lalit. So Shubham is waiting for pandemic to get over. There are others who have accepted it as a new norm. Lalit, what are your clients doing? How are they treating the COVID? Are they waiting to get over, waiting for it to get over, or have they adopted, they pivoted to work in the new normal? And
Yeah,
what's your view?
valid, very valid question. And I think adaptation to time is the most relevant thing, that if you want to kind of scale up and look at how you want to position yourself in the market. And we've seen in the last, in fact, COVID has changed a lot of things, and new ideas have come up. I think the idea that we were also sharing earlier before this call, new ideas have come up. Many industries that were not existing have kind of blooming in the situation. We've seen companies get into edutech in a very different manner, as in there was a phase after demonetization, we were talking fintech, and I think it's been a phase of edutech for the last 1 year, and this run is going to go on for beyond a period of time. So that's something, there's a change in way education is looked at today, as in the way it was looked at maybe pre-COVID. Byju's did a lot of bit, as in what Byju's is getting in, but I think I'm kind of not very big fan of Byju's, but there are a lot of gaps out there, and I think a lot of startups are trying to fill in that in terms of how the home tutors are going to work like. So I've seen clients pivot into different business models, come up with different ideas, and there have been a lot of investor interest also. It's not just that the startup has gone done something. There have been a lot of investors interested in such models, and they're trying to build up on that. They have pivoted. Even the clients who kind of were having some kind of issues in terms of how to manage that situation, obviously there are ways to kind of, so there were a lot of news articles that we read that people have cut salaries and all of that. There were a lot of restructuring going on, a lot of people being sacked from jobs, people losing jobs. The startups that we have, they looked at it differently in terms of how can we restructure and also retain people at that point in time. So the ESOP plan is something that plays a very crucial role to kind of retain your team in that sense. So we did a lot of activities in terms of how to restructure. Is there some kind of model? Is there some kind of a forlong plan? Is how does the ESOP plan can help you? So we did a lot of structuring at that point in time, and a lot of clients were even welcoming, and they were kind of looking forward for such things. So one is obviously pivoting into new business ideas, but internally with the limited resources, how you can kind of come up with different things that can work on in your favor.
So talking about ESOPs, Lalit, how can partnership firms like yours and mine can do more for their employees to stay back, since we cannot issue ESOPs?
Very relevant question. First, we'll have to do private limited company and do all the kind of ESOP. But there are ways. In fact, a very interesting case. So as we said that we do a lot of outbound transaction where there are a lot of founders getting together. So one of the LLP agreements that we did, we bought in a vesting schedule even in an LLP agreement. Obviously, just like a founder agreement that we have, like Shubham mentioned that they do a lot of founder agreements and there is a vesting schedule. There are clauses that is defined in terms of who's going to do what are the roles out there. Even in an LLP agreement, it was very interesting to build that, and it took a lot of time and a lot of back and forth in terms of how that gets built up. So there was a framework that we originally prepared, built that in an LLP agreement, and in fact, one of the clients we just closed. In fact, it's a LLP again, and they have a group of people. We've kind of defined them as key employees. We have an employment agreement with them in a separate company, so it's a different form of a structure. There are 3 entities together, but the investment arm that is there is that LLP. So the LLP has the vesting schedule within the LLP agreement in terms of how it's going to move forward. What happens if a founder or if that employee leaves midway? So there is a kind of a situation that is defined out there. Not very regular that you will find. It is something that we've kind of trying to build it up. But yeah, may not be possible in all situations that are there. What we do internally is obviously not go for that, but obviously have some kind of an incentive plan, appraisals, and all of that anybody would rather want to do, and give them as much of freedom that is required. So just like one of the questions that you asked earlier in terms of how the team is important, why the team is important, and founder is very limited by the resources. Uh, Team certainly plays a very crucial role in terms of getting you head on and doing various activities for you. And in fact, they are the torch bearers of your organization. That's the best way to put it. In fact, that's what is going to define how they kind of move forward from there. But to keep them involved and give them as much of responsibility and back then in their failures. In fact, if as an entrepreneur, if we are there to kind of support them, let them fall. That's something that as an entrepreneur, it's kind of applicable all across, because I think failures is an opportunity to learn. I think it's something not just for the startups, but within the team also. If we have that culture that is built in, that if you fail, don't worry, I'm there. It's like a family that we are working together. Apart from the fancy stuff that we can do in terms of ESOP and the other stuff, I think it's more of building a culture that helps people stay along the company. So one of the cultures that at least we built in is that failure is treated as an opportunity to learn. It doesn't stop there. Even startups also, I think multiple failures, I think, will lead to a successful startup. I think they learn across the journey. There could be multiple reasons that you could fail. In spite of doing everything right, you can still fail. But what's important is that after you fall, you need to learn, stand up and walk again. I think that's the story that we try to build in, at least with our team. I think that's been helping us very well.
Absolutely. I think that's some great tip, Lalit. So team is very important to everybody, to every entrepreneur, and treating them well, caring for them, having empathy, having compassion, and making sure you treat them as a family are very important concepts that entrepreneurs a lot of time forget to practice these concepts. If you, I was watching a couple of documentaries. All these people, whether it's let's say Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, they have been jackass bosses, and they were like extremely bad bosses. Nobody wanted to work with them. Bill Gates was telling in his documentary that when he used to enter office, he used to go to lunchtime. He would go down and he has memorized the number plates of people, the car number plates, and he would say, "हाँ ये office में आया, ये नहीं आया, ये नहीं आया, ये नहीं आया." Bill Gates was the last person to leave from the office, and he would only see his car parking in the parking lot when he used to leave from office. So, but yes, over the years, that was a different generation. 30 years back, 40 years back, different generation. You could manage to harass them and make them slog. But I think current millennial and Gen Z are looking for connection, are looking for more than a job, are looking for friendship, looking for bonhomie, looking for good work environment. Their expectations have changed over the last 30, 40 years. And today you cannot be expecting your people to work the way people have worked in the past. Sambhav, coming to you, tell us about the most successful startups that you have been working with. What makes them unique, and what makes them successful?
Interesting. So we have had startups that were working out typical Amazon Google story in the making, working out of a room in Rohini, single DDA flat room, one-person team. We got the accounting data from them, which was hardly any data. And but a typical co-founder instinct, right? It's into a digital marketing space. Uh, it had a vision of simplifying digital marketing, specifically around the education space. That was the vision it was working with. Today, it's a 400 plus employee company, above 100 crores turnover, looking forward towards a SME IPO in near future. Similarly, there was this cloud tech startup that started off just next. We started off with 91 Spring Boot. That was a co-working space. So luckily, we had a lot of clientele from that space early on. And this tech startup, again, the next guy next door on the next chair, one-person company, started off it in building the cloud data platform. Today, again, a 40 plus employee company, revenue in crores. All these stories, the common thing which we've already discussed on this call, the best thing they did was building the right team, getting the right person who's not just a team member, because ultimately you'll spend more time with this team rather than your own family, right? Ultimately, your mind will be working more on this idea rather than when you go back and spend time on yourself. So if you are not accepting what you are working, or if you're not aligned to the idea of that founder or the startup, it's going to be a recipe for failure. So on in all these startups, early stage employees were like families. They were working on something that they believed in, and hence the success story was early for them. Versus a few startups that did that typical mistake of hiring, say, interns for subject matter expertise role, right? And ultimately they realized, oh, they were supposed to have a subject matter expert for them, for example, marketing stuff, or for an example, setting up the operational processes. So typically this has been the journey where there have been startups who have come with this problem of the founder being astonishing. I mean, but he struggled on building the right team, and he struggled on getting the processes in. And once those are sorted, most of them have gone on to a path of success stories.
Mhm. So yes, so everybody is trying to bring the point home that team is very important. Building right team is extremely crucial. So let's talk about the team from Shubham. Shubham, tell us about your team, and do you? There are two ways of hiring people: hiring based upon capability and hiring based upon values. Capability means that suppose looking for a digital marketing expert and you are hiring somebody with 15 years experience in digital marketing, that's capability, experience. But another guy who has only about 2 years experience in digital marketing, but he has the right values. He's a go-getter. He is hungry for achievement. He wants to learn more. He wants to never say die. He has a positive attitude. So these are values that people have or people not have. What would you prefer?
My prefer would be the second choice. As an early startup, first thing, the second choice would be more affordable to the company, being a 2 year thing. The second, and the practical. So the second thing, the values, the point which you mentioned is he's eager to learn. And the digital marketing, the field you mentioned is every day there would be something new coming up. The 15-year experience guy would lay it back and say, I know everything. I would do the things which I know. But a hungry guy would go and search for various new things. There is LinkedIn story coming up. There are various features coming up on various social media. So a hungry guy, if you go for that, learn from that and execute that. So in the situation given, I would always prefer the second choice for hiring the team.
Interesting. So that's a great concept. So hiring based upon values is a new thing that honestly we also now have adopted. We're not looking for people who are experienced, looking for people who are right values. Whether they have less experience, more experience, we will give you capability because we know how to do the work. So we'll give you capabilities. So the person with right values can get the capabilities and can fly. So that's exactly what we have also been doing in our firm. Lalit, coming to you, there are two concepts, there are two ways of working. One is called Steve Jobs way and another is called Bill Gates way, and they are entirely different when both have been working, as you know. Steve Jobs way is when he came up with iPhone, he said, he told customers, you don't know what you want, I know what you want, so use this what I'm giving you. Whereas Bill Gates used to come up with Microsoft and he would say, give me feedback, I will take your feedback, improve, take your feedback, improve. But Steve Jobs was saying, you don't know what you want, let me decide what you want. And he would make an iPhone and the versions of iPhone and iPods. And people. So which, according to you, is a better way for startups?
I think the Bill Gates way would be the nicer way, because I think there is a problem that exists, that there is a problem that somebody acknowledges that, yes, this is the problem that exists. And in fact, even if he's not aware of that problem, it's necessary to make that person aware that what lies ahead, that this is a problem situation and that needs to be solved. So I think what's important is to identify the problem that every business entrepreneur would do, and try to work towards that to solve that problem, so that it kind of helps to build the business organization, the product, services, whatever you're kind of trying to do, and in the right manner. So like whenever, even when we look at, we do a lot of diligences, as in when we kind of helping a lot of investors invest money, we see a lot of issues within the finance and accounting team. And like Sambhav rightly shared that the data that we really get from them is nothing, as in we have to create everything. And it's like, we're kind of, sometimes it appears to be, are we cooking the books? It's like that situation, it's been that extreme. So, and in fact, we have to imagine, and we have to be really asking that proactive questions, as in what is this, what, so it becomes very, very critical. So if we are going to try to push and say that this size fits all, I think we may fail in terms of what we are doing. At least we will certainly fail. And I think customization is the need of the hour. Even like when we look at, see the way things have changed, OTT, the way we never thought OTT, the way it is kind of come up, it's not that, it's like customized to the users, as in, and there have been in fact the concept that has come up, it's like what the user likes. It's not that you're pushing an idea to him. Movie theaters were like, whatever they're showing, it's Shah Rukh Khan movie or maybe a Salman Khan movie, it's going to be a hit. Today OTT gives an opportunity to everybody. So it's like what you need and curated to your requirement, as in, so the Bill Gates formula, as you said, what's your problem, what are you looking at, can I help you with that, is something that is everybody's looking out for. I think if you can, at least our organization, and I'm able to solve that, I'll be more than happy to kind of look at that problem, ask him what's your issue that you're facing, and then try to curate the solution for him as per his needs.
Fabulous. So yes, so just because something is working for Steve Jobs, you should not adopt it. You should see, you should also see what is your natural game. For example, let's say when Sehwag was being told to do foot movement, he doesn't move. He places at one place. The coach was trying to coach him that do have some foot movement, have some style, have some trick, and he failed. When he played his natural game, he succeeded. So it's very important also to play your natural game and not just emulate somebody because that guy was Steve Jobs. It's a very important tips, Lalit. Thank you so much for sharing it. One more question to you is, what is more important, the founder or the idea?
I think the founder is the idea. I think I would rather say that founder is the idea. No, you cannot split the founder from the idea. I think either idea comes from his heart. It's not even his brain. I think it really comes from his heart. And I'll tell you, one of the investor pitches, the investor asked a founder, "What's your plan B?" The founder was speechless. He said, "I don't have a plan B." And the investor was very on for that. He really invested in him because the founder said that this is his idea, he's going to put in or wherewithal to make it successful. I think so that I think the bread of what is an idea, it really stems from who's the founder. As in, that idea could be given to anybody else, but if it comes from that founder and he leads from his heart, I think you can't move it from the founder. So for us also, when we kind of look at SHAs and we're negotiating from the founder side, we place lot of relevance on the founder, as in the document has to be such that it is founder friendly. It cannot be such that, and there have been terms, and I think Shubham and both Sambhav looked at it, all of these documents, it's very lopsided. Sometimes it's too investor friendly. There are a lot of clauses which may not be in favor of the company and not in the founder. So for me, I think my focus is on the founder rather than just the idea. So I think founder plays a very, very crucial role.
You're absolutely right. So from
I
the
would
and
like to
you
I would like to add to the point from the investor's perspective. Investor is betting money at the early stage on the founder's head.
Yes.
He's confident that this founder will make this idea run, or will pivot it, or will do certain changes to idea and will get it run. So the founder is always more important than the idea.
Mhm. Yes, because the founders are basically changing. A founder can be a serial entrepreneur, can make one idea successful, can go to the other one, make the second idea successful as well. So yes, founder is definitely perhaps more important than the idea itself, because the the key lies in execution. The idea might be great, if you're not able to execute it well with the right team, with the right process, you will be bound to fail no matter how strong the idea is. Uh, Sambhav, tell us a little bit about the government schemes available. Uh, to Indian startups for funding, and how can you and your firm help these startups get the funding from the government?
Great question. So, typically, right from 2016, when Startup India initiative was launched, one thing that has yet to pick up, there have been some movements, is the fund of funds which the government announced of 10,000 crores, right? Where it is not a direct funding that the government is doing, it is either through state incubators or they are basically empaneling incubators through which they will be doing the funding. So it is not, and apart from that, there are SIDBI collateral free programs, but unfortunately we have not seen that great movement in that debt kind of a story, though we have seen some movement on the fund of funds through incubators and state associations, where each state has a startup policy in which it is clearly defined on the selection criteria, and that has actually been decentralized and delegated to different agencies. So, for an example, if you talk about all agencies that are Atal Incubation supported, you will read the word AIC. They have all been granted funds, and in that grant, there is a specific section for which they have to report and give that to startups, early stage startups and incubatees. So the right way to look at those government supports would be through these incubators, which is the fastest way. Apart from that, there are collateral-free loans through SIDBIs. There are Udyam loans, but of course, the startup industry might not be the best suited there because they don't have a cash flow positive approach early on if they are into a development mode. So typically, fund of funds through incubation is the easiest that we have seen so far on the government side of it. Apart from it, at state levels, there are startup policies that are being framed, and it's necessary to keep an eye on them because most of the startups are not aware of state-specific policies that they have. For an example, Haryana has a state-specific policy for incubators, specifically for even lesser number of seats if they are opening up a small centers. So it's important to go through those policies, both specific state level and the Startup India central level. Look out for incubators which are Atal Incubation supported. Look at their criteria for selections. Most of them are not that stringent. If you are falling into those criterias, it's easier to apply. But as we have seen, the conversion ratio has not been that great. We've not seen a lot of that 10,000 crores yet being mobilized in the country.
So what you're saying is the amount is available, but getting it, and as we know, is not an easy task.
Yeah, you need to be at the right place at the right time and knowing the right
Mhm.
processes. So like Shubham is rightly put up in the chat box, there are industry specific, there are segment specific grants, all of them leading to that Startup India program. You need to know the exact terms, go back to the, of course, as I said, financial consultants. And one thing which I personally foresee is that this startup language and the startup also needs to get in, because most of the times when people or startups, specifically in Tier B and Tier C cities, are going to professionals, professionals are not aware of such schemes at all, right? So the knowledge sharing that has to happen through the right channels is also some gap that still needs to get fulfilled. The education part of how the fund of fund has to be utilized, that is also not picked up that great.
Mhm. Cool. So that's a great tip again, Sambhav. Uh, Lalit, over to you. I want to ask you, as an entrepreneur yourself, what's your obsession? So, in your business, so every entrepreneur has an obsession. Uh, let me take an example. For example, let's say in about a decade back, about 12, 13 years back, there was an entrepreneur called Tony Shays in the US. And Tony Shays was selling footwear for women. He was selling footwear for women online, and he thought it would be a great idea to sell footwear for women in online in the US. And the idea failed. He had a lot of investors, he burnt a lot of cash, but he could not really sell footwear to women online in the US. Now, but his obsession was so he was burning a lot of money, and he was sitting one day and he was saying his obsession was to how can he add value to his customers, because women have a special relationship with footwear. I mean, all of us can vouch for that. So, but he was not able to sell footwear to women online. So he made a announcement. He was trying to make an announcement that so women can come online, जितनी मर्जी आप फुटवेयर ले लो, शिपिंग फ्री, एक तरफ फ्री दूसरी तरफ फ्री, अब पसंद नहीं है वापस कर दो, शिपिंग टोटली फ्री. So investors were saying, Tony, are you crazy? You're gonna make the shipping free, but shipping is pretty expensive in the US. So investors were saying, Tony, are you crazy? You're gonna make shipping free both ways. They will buy 10 pairs. They don't like, they can return 10 pairs and you will give them money and shipping is free. He said, yes, I'm gonna do that. But investors were mad at him because they're burning a lot of cash. And he said, let's do it for 1 month. Let's try for 1 month. So he tried that. He allowed women to buy these footwear online for a month and was taking the footwear back if they didn't like it, and the idea became a hit. And the rest is history. He sold his venture to Amazon at $1.1 billion valuation. So his Tony Hsieh's obsession was to add value to his customers no matter what. Similarly, my question to you is, Lalit, what is your obsession in your business?
Yeah, so very valid question. The obsession that we have, at least while we started this, was that we wanted a 360-degree firm. As in, the 360 degrees is like somebody comes and asks a question. They need some tax support, some indirect tax support, overseas, any kind of restructuring, tax planning, international tax. My thought was that I should be able to say a yes, that yes, I'll be able to help you out with this. So that's the obsession, as in whatever comes up our way, we're not trying to over specialize in one particular domain. We add as many partners as we can. So today, as we stand, we are 7 partners. I started with a sole proprietor firm about 15 years back, but today we are 7 partners and a team that we built up, and we are looking at more kind of things that we can add to the flavor, and we can add as many value add solutions that we can provide to the client. So obviously that builds, and where we did, obviously we learned it from where I was in PwC, why we looked at that this particular firm is able to solve many such solutions, and they're able to provide all such services to their clients. And so we try to kind of emulate that and try to solve as many things. And obviously it's not just our firm. What helps is the networking. I think, Amit, you've been of a great help, that all the IP that most of our clients are struggling with, their basic trademark thing, there have been a lot of litigations also. So it's not, if not our firm, then maybe an extended arm, or maybe a trusted partner who can solve the problem, but it will be kind of monitored by us. So it kind of helps to solve that problem. So if my obsession is that if we can be a 360-degree firm and as many yeses as I can say to my clients, I think I would have achieved what I'm looking out for.
Great. That's a great obsession, Lalit. So Lalit, with this following the same obsession, I think a lot of your clients are also being advised to have a US office. And then the US office is their primary office, their parent office, and the subsidiaries in India. Why do you advise your clients to have a US parent and India subsidiary? What benefits? What are the benefits of that?
Basically, I'll tell you what, it stems from 2 reasons. One, obviously, if it's a B2B SaaS company and it's a global platform and it's a tech play that is there, it's a deep technology play, to sell a SaaS product. And I think all the SaaS companies who are into B2B will realize it's much easier to have the value for money in a US organization than in India. Like, even if a SaaS platform, you say, I give you a subscription platform, would you pay for that? The answer would be maybe out of 10, 2 people will say yes, I'll pay, 8 will say no. Maybe out of those 8, 5 are interested, but they wouldn't pay for that. In the US, the market is different. I think it's totally different. Everybody's kind of looking out for those solutions. So B2B SaaS, it really stems in, if you're solving a problem which is more global, I think US is the place to be in that sense, because it's not just the investment part. Business is a bigger reason. And I think eventually most of the companies land up having their own hirings also. Initially, when they do a setup, it's just their company without any hirings. But later on, even the founder, we look at founders move in the US and manage the business from there, hire in the US. And they have a playbook in terms of how to do that. That's primary reason one. The reason two is obviously the investment, the valuation that is kind of derived from your business model and your revenue model just being an Indian company versus a global model where you're kind of in the US. The US investors kind of force you to be there and get you the stuff. And obviously, why the investors are also looking out, there are a lot of investor protection which is kind of given in the US regulation, which is not there in India. So we may say that the Indian the rating of doing business in India has gone up. That's fine, as in that's okay. And I think we could really count the number of benefits that you can really get from what the government support is. But in terms of what you get in the US, in terms of flexibility, in terms of look at the number of filings that we're doing in India, it's crazy, as in the enormous filings that we do. Though I'm on the other side, I'm actually a beneficiary of that. I'm doing a lot of filings. I'm more than happy because everybody comes to me. We don't have a lean period, as in there's always some deadline that's going on. So as a CA firm, I'm more than happy. I spoke to one of the guys who was getting kind of standing for some election, and a CA person. I told him that boss, we need something which is simplifying the law. We don't need to complicate it more. Uh, Nobody is really interested in simplifying it. Trust me. I asked that person. That person said, "Was this laws are complicated and it's going to be the way it is." In the US, there are complex laws, but I think, and in fact, I'll tell you what my experience. In fact, India, if you've kind of, there is a penalty, you have to file an appeal, and there is a forum that you have to go through all the drill. There is a tribunal, there's a high court, there's a supreme court, you go all of that. US, there was a delay filing by a person that was the first year of business operations to the IRS. We applied for a waiver, and they were forthcoming because this was the first year they gave a waiver. Do we have that out here? I think I can put
Very
it up
interesting.
out here. Is there some kind of a solution? Same thing in, I tell you, this kind of thing, even in Singapore, there was a wrong filing that was done by that client. We went to the ACRA, we asked them that this is something which is erroneously happened. Can we do something about it? We just had to pay a nominal late fee. That's it. Rest, no implication. So I think it's there are various other things that get kind of built in. So reason one, as I said, is from a business perspective that your customers need you, and you have to be near to your customers, as in you can't stay in India, do a service to a US customer, so you have to go there and serve them. That's one. Investor, again, they would want you to kind of be there because investor protection, valuation, all of that, exits, because you may not know that one of the bigger giants like the Googles or the Facebooks or the other players would want to acquire you, so you are kind of ready for that. So that's step two. Step three, obviously there are various flexibilities that is there. While you have multiple countries, you have to take care of all the regulations that you have to comply with, but there are a lot of other benefits that you can get out there. Even the incubation program, like the fund that India has started right now, there are similar funds that are there in UK, is there in Ireland, a lot of incubation support provided by the government themselves. So you can watch out for that also. Even in US, while COVID happened, there were a lot of programs that were run by the US. If you had a US hiring, so there were a lot of loans that were given with a waiver plan. So a lot of business support was given. So I think a lot of other things come into play while this is being created. So it's not just one reason. And one last thing, Amit, you will find it funny, but many people find it, and you can be the right person to tell me. They say that IP laws are the best in the US, and that's why they want to go to the US. So that's one. I can keep that question for you, and you can tell me whether that's a relevant thing, or you can do an IP staying in India also. But that's one of the things that people tell me that, and the founders are really kind of having an aura of that, that if my company is in the US, I can protect my IP very well if it's a US company. That's one of it, but there are typically 4 broad reasons, and IP question is to you. You tell me whether that's relevant or how does it work.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lalit, thank you so much for all those 4 tips. That's a very pertinent thing to do, to have a setup in the US and have a branch in India. So yes, IP laws or laws per se are most respected in the US, especially IP. It's respected. The the penalty for copying somebody's IP are huge. You can lose your business, and if you're on the other side, if you have the IP, you can become a billionaire by having the right IP. So yes, US is the #1 country in terms of respect of the IP laws. There's no doubt about it. Uh, Sambhav, coming to you, this since talking about IP now, the startups that you work with, do they really care about IP? And do investors who invest into these startups, do investors as well as the startups, do they really care about IP in India?
I would say yes, they do now, and that's a trend that is changing. I would not say back 5, 6 years, 7 years back. IP used to come in when validation of idea happened. I mean, IP used to come in when investors used to ask, "Oh, you have an IP." That's when they apply a trademark. But that trend is changing now, specifically of the aspect of people are now also realizing that the IP laws are better in, say, Singapore or specifically US, right? And it is also more or investor driven as well, where founders are now aware of that they need to have protect the IP right at the time when their organization is coming into existence. So one trend we are looking at as a change is whenever a new company is coming to us, say for incorporation, or we are advising founders on setting up the framework, IP is not something we are recommending. So if initially we were recommending to say 8 out of 10, that number is now down to say 4 out of 10. 6 are asking for the IP to be done as soon as the company is done applying for trademark, inquiring about patents. So that trend and that culture is setting in India also, but it has to be politically driven as well. So that's where the friction is on the startup ecosystem side. There is awareness. There has to be a reciprocal response from the political and the administrative front also.
Right. So honestly, in our view, since we have an IP focused law firm, uh, in the last few years, in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot has changed in India as well as IP is concerned. A patent application in India used to take about 6 or 7 years to get an approval, get a grant in India. Now it takes about 7 to 8 months to get a grant in India for a patent application, which is perhaps one of the fastest in the world. US में 2.5 साल लगते हैं पेटेंट ग्रांट होने में. China takes about 18 months. Japan takes about 12 months. Europe takes about 4 years to give a grant on a patent application. India में 6 से 8 महीने में पेटेंट ग्रांट हो रहा है जो कि पहले नहीं होता था. Now on terms of trademark, now trademarks they're like gone to different level altogether. Trademarks used to take about 1 year, 2 year to get a grant of trademark in India, which is now happening in weeks. They put bots for trademark, and the bot will check कि तुम्हारा ट्रेडमार्क नया है कि नहीं है, ट्रेडमार्क कुछ में ट्रेडमार्क में कुछ नया है कि नहीं है, and the bot will give you a report saying that ट्रेडमार्क पुराना है, बताओ तुम्हारे ट्रेडमार्क में क्या नया है. So a lot is happening in India, and now there have been forums and people are because when Modi went to different platforms about 7 8 years back, he was being reprimanded for having weak IP laws, especially in Paris Convention when he went to Paris for a few years back. They said India में हम नहीं आएंगे because IP laws in India are very very weak. So that's when it all started. The IPR policy came into picture. The expediting of patent application, trademark applications came into picture, and all that thing has been happening in IP. So India is definitely improving as far as IP is concerned. And yes, a lot of our clients have also in India, and so about 65% of our clients are US clients, about 35% are Indian clients, and these Indian clients are also getting a lot IP savvy because when they are seeking investment from an investor, the investor asks them, हाँ कुछ IP है, तुम्हारे में नया क्या है? So the patent application is the answer to the tough questions which the investors asks you. And then how will you beat competition? If you file a patent application, you can stop your competition from copying you. So a patent application definitely helps you to answer some tough questions which the investor asks you. Coming to you, Shubham, tell us about your biggest challenges in the business that you're facing and how you're resolving them. Non-COVID.
So right now the biggest challenge is pandemic. The business is
Non-COVID.
going slow for the workspace.
Non-COVID
Non-COVID.
challenges.
Okay, so non-COVID challenges in the workspace industry that so when we entered the B2B business, there are in the co-working segment there is two types. The one is catering to the corporates and another catering to the freelancer and the startups. And when we entered, we were competing with 91 Springboards, SmartWorks, WeWork, and all of them. So the initial challenge was what profile we should show to the bigger companies. The example which I had given you, the 500 seats for a Fortune 500 company, we had to do a roughly 3 to 6 up to 6 months work to convince them that we will be able to serve them. So that was the initial challenge to project to the companies that we would be able to serve the companies, rather we are new in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Sure,
a challenge.
yes. So
in
smaller
back then.
companies, so let's say startups when they're looking for bigger clients, of course the sales cycles are very long. It can take months to convert a bigger client. So therefore, it is important to basically, I think, focus at smaller clients in the beginning. You're able to convert a smaller client faster. अगर आपको सीधा Amazon चाहिए as a client, it might just take some time. So go for smaller clients, they get converted faster. So in the last round, we have a few minutes left, guys. In the last round, if any of you have any question to a fellow speaker or to me, you can shoot now.
So that's to Shubham because I have also been looking at workspace industry for quite a while now. It's like a second dent. I mean, there was resilience in the first wave, that fine passed, and I think nobody in workspace industry was ready for the second one. Everybody was waiting for revival. So what's the contingency plan now? How are the next 2 quarters looking to you?
So right now, for all the workspace who have already signed the properties, they are going through a burning mode, and they have dealt with certain landlords that they have got the rent cuts in the second lockdown as well. The contingency plan is to reduce the acquisition and focus on the client building first and then go for the property acquisition. And normally a workspace would go and acquire the properties and then they subsequently search for client. But because of the uncertainty in the market, it's the first is client and then the property, because a lot of properties are available in the market but lesser number of clients. So as per ourselves, we are first tapping the clients and then we'll be acquiring properties for them to serve them.
So get the buyer first.
Get the buyer first.
Egg versus chicken.
So we have developed our own systems that we can deliver the client in a month. The bare shell property can be furnished with the complete setup in a month. So that's not a bigger deal. But signing the property without a client would start a burning for the company.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have no questions, I'll just ask my last question to Lalit and we'll close. Lalit, top 2 advices you can give to a startup, which is about 6 months old, 1 year old. What would be your top 2 tips? Top 2. भाई ये करो तो बस सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा.
गुरु मंत्र, ललित जी का गुरु मंत्र.
गुरु मंत्र.
गुरु मंत्र नहीं, गुरु मंत्र से 2 नहीं है, बहुत ज्यादा है, 2 तो बहुत छोटे हो जाएंगे. मतलब एटलीस्ट आई थिंक 8-9 थिंग्स इज सपोज्ड टू बी देयर इन द 2 तो
चलो ठीक है, let's go for 4 then.
yeah. So basically, yeah, so obviously whatever you're doing, have a business plan in place first of all, even before the pitch deck, as in even before you go to the investor to kind of sell him your idea, you try to sell your idea to yourself. Does it make a commercial sense? Because I think what people forget is that ultimately investor capital is kind of a product today, but what's going to be a constant from here on is your revenue. So I think what really the focus should be, how can I translate my business idea into a revenue, for which a business plan is very important. What's my burn? That's another question that I have to look at. If there is an investment that I'm raising, how much should I raise? Is it going to be enough for the next 18 months? Because if you're going to raise, at least you should look at the next 18 months, because if you run out of money, you're not going to go again and raise funds again. Fortunately, what happens in the industry is like, as you keep raising funds, your PR grows and automatically the investors are attracted towards you as you kind of create the buzz. But what's important is to raise adequate, do not raise less. Have your obviously the co-founder agreement that Sambhav said, have your IP assignment agreement, that because one of the startups that we faced did not have an IP assignment, and later on the investors kind of refused to invest in that particular startup. So it became a very big issue in that sense. So that's again one thing that has to be there in place. Have your MVP done appropriately. Have the target audience that you're going to. TAM is very important. Again, these are financial terms that I'm speaking about, but TAM is the real important thing that you're supposed to, when you do your business segment, you look at what's your target audience, and out of the target audience, how much are you able to serve to? That's something that the founder has to be aware of. So it's not just a business plan for the heck of it, just for kind of, because the investor, as I am preparing a business plan, that should not be the case. You should know your business, how you're going to function. Because many times, you know what happens, many startups, the revenue doesn't start for the first 2 years. There's no revenue at all. There's completely no revenue. And it's just building your platform. And I think one more thing, what's very important, and I've seen many startups do it very successfully, and I think people should continue doing that, is your PR. Whenever you raise funds, your PR has to be done at the right time, because your announcements, where are you doing it, create the buzz. That I think again plays a very crucial role while you do that. Have somebody, as in this is something that I've always, I have followed that thing. Have somebody as your coach or a mentor, because I think you need to look up to, because the founder cannot run solo, as in he needs to have somebody who's a good advisor to him, who's kind of mentoring you. It could be anybody. It could be it could be somebody professional in the field, or maybe somebody you can kind of trust and gives you the right guidance. So having a mentor also kind of really helps, apart from the other stuff. And already, I think the other aspects we've already spoken about, the team and the other kind of things that comes into play. But yeah, these will be the few things that a startup would really have to look at it and focus on the how fast you can look at your revenues and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, Lalit. I think those are some great tips for anybody to take home and work on them: business plan, coach, PR, partner, team, product market fit. These are very important concepts which will help your startups founders to go a long way and be successful. Guys, thank you very much for such a fabulous discussion. Really enjoyed talking to all of you. I myself learned a lot from all three of you. This session is recorded. We'll send the clips about next week, and really enjoyed talking to you guys. I wish you a fabulous weekend, and you should stay at home and stay safe.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lalit. Thanks, Ambab. Thanks, Shubham. Take
Thank
care
you
of
for
yourself.
having us, Amit. It was a great discussion.
Yes, Shubham. Thank you so much. See you around. Bye, guys.
Bye.